for everyone showing up. We were kind of tough on programs. I was looking for somebody to speak today, and I didn't want to ask Bruce because he had spoken about buying a used glider right before the big auction. So I kind of felt like I had taken my favor from Bruce already. But then he said, well, I happen to have this talk that I've been working on, talking about wiring for gliders. And so, hey, you have to just mention that. I'll grab you as a speaker. But for me, it's been even more personal. I'm an electrical engineer from way back, and then moved into software. So I kind of got my hands off the soldering iron and the various instruments. But this hobby has kind of brought me back into it, and I've just really enjoyed wiring my own servo leads, and I wire my own battery packs, and like I said, use my soldering iron. I suppose the most complicated thing I've done is a voltage regulator with a little IC chip, which brought back memories of the old days. So it's just a really fun part of the hobby, and I owe a lot of it to Bruce, who's given me advice, and you gave me your old crimping tool,
Oh, yeah?
the cheap one. There's two types to get, the good one, the cheap one.
One I kept.
Yeah, that's right. But it's just been really fun, and I really appreciate Bruce. I thought it'd be a good thing to share with the whole group of how to create all your crazy parts instead of carrying all the, buying new servo leads and wire and batteries and everything else. When as a fixed part, you can actually roll your own and have quite a bit of flexibility and quite a bit of fun. So, Bruce, go ahead.
Alrighty, so Sailplane wiring 101. So I kind of biased my talk towards wiring harnesses because that's what I do most. Most people know I fly Explorers, 4-meter airplanes, 6 servos, 4 in the wing, 2 in the fuselage. And I bought a couple of wiring harnesses, commercial wiring harnesses, but wasn't really happy with them for several reasons. And I've had other people, I built planes for other people, they bought me harnesses. And usually I end up giving them their harness back and I make my own. Because I feel more comfortable about it. I get something that's more custom built to the airplane. You buy a harness from a manufacturer, you get these big long wires, the gauge is wrong, there's more wires than you need, and for me, I usually end up tweaking them anyway. So I'm going to talk mostly about making wiring harnesses, but it applies for servo extensions too. You need a servo extension, so you're building an airplane and you need a 12-inch servo extension. Oh, sorry, it's Monday and the hobby shop's closed. And you don't want to mail order that and all that kind of stuff. So for me, this is my box of strap wires. And I go through it and I pull out what I need, and my crimping tool, and my kit of little servo ends, and my little box of miscellaneous connectors and stuff like that, and I sit down and build a wiring harness or a servo extension. A harness like this would take me probably about an hour and a half to build. And this has got kind of a lot of different techniques that I use. So this is an Explorer harness. Got the wing harness, and then the fuse harness. This is a DB9 computer connector. Boy, this one's tight. And the idea is this mounts in the fuse, the wing goes down, and it automatically connects all the wing servos in the wings. This one, I've got flaps, so I've got 3 leads going for flaps, regular standard servo stuff. Ailerons, I only have 1 wire, signal wire going. Okay, because what I've done is I've doubled up the power up on the connectors. Gives me a little bit more space to run the leads through, and I don't need to carry all that extra wire in there. Wire is actually pretty heavy. Wing servo, this is the main panel. So flaps, ailerons, and actually this is the end of, I've got a solid centerpiece, 3-piece wing, plug-on tips. So this will go out to the end of the tip panel, and then the aileron will plug into it. I've got a standard, people call these female, but these are actually male plug on the end of it, and I actually glue this into the end of the wingtip. so that the servo will plug in. And then for the flap servo, I use a header pin, PCB header pin. You buy them at Fry's or surplus stores or something like that. And you get a whole row of them, like this. And I just solder the wires onto it, and these are the same pin center as your standard servo connector. And this is not something that I'm going to be plugging and unplugging. Hopefully I'm going to plug it in once, and then unplug it after I destroy the airplane and then take the parts out. But actually it's only going to be one time, and what I'll do is I will plug this in, I insulate it with hot glue, and then heat shrink over both the plug from the servo and this plug so they don't unplug.
Are those headers, is that gold plated?
Yeah. Standard PCB header, you go to Fry's, you buy a whole bag of them for a couple of bucks.
This is gold?
I think it's gold plated.
No.
No?
You know why I asked? I don't trust anything but gold plated.
Oh, okay.
It tin oxidizes every time.
Well, I'm plugging it in one time and I'm hoping that it's never coming apart.
That's the worst condition.
Yeah.
You never
Oh, don't paint
exercise.
it?
That's why you want gold.
This outlasted the plane.
Well, you can as long as it stays dry.
Yeah.
Well, you can pack it in
It's
grease
sealed-
too. and
well,
that'll-
it's
Yeah.
sealed inside the wing,
Dry.
and it's got heat shrink around it. And then I use little strips of heat shrink to build the loom here.
So those pins are crimped or soldered?
The header pins are soldered, and then the regular servos are crimped. And I'll get into crimping in a little bit. So, why would you want to build your own harnesses or servo extensions? Well, if you look at the cost, okay? If you buy a commercial harness for a 4-meter plane, 60 bucks. 2-meter, meter and a half, 50 bucks. Very limited supply, I'll get into that. If I do it myself, I can buy 10 feet of wire, the servo connectors, the housing, the sleeves, the DB9, 16 bucks to build a harness versus 60 bucks plus tax and license and handling and shipping and all that other stuff. And availability, okay? You can't go down to a hobby shop and buy a wiring harness for a 4-meter sailplane. You have to order them. I know of one supplier, that's Soaring USA. I don't know what the Maxa guys and the Super guys do. I looked on Barry Kennedy's website, I did not see a wiring harness option there. Some high-end planes come with wiring harnesses built into them, but most of them do not. They're not made for all models. So again, this is a custom fit. You buy a wiring harness, it's one size fits all. Custom application. Commercial harnesses, universal fit. Mixed power requirements and wire gauges. Say I'm building an RES plane. I don't need 20 gauge wire running out to my spoiler servos, my little high-tech 55s or 5-gram servos. I'm going to run a real light, a 30 gauge or 32 gauge wire out there. Weight reduction, same idea, especially DLGs. DLGs use really light wires. 32 gauge, this is 32 twisted, 32 ribbon, and we use the smallest connectors we can find, trying to get the weight down. So DLG weight is really critical. And mixed connectors. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the multiplex connectors. Sometimes you use a multiplex connector, sometimes you use a DB9, sometimes you use the Deans. Now, to build it, yeah, I said 16 bucks to build it, but you have to be tooled up to do it, right? And so a lot of, you guys probably have a lot of these tools already. The crimp tool, we already talked about the economy tool. The economy tool is like a pair of pliers, right? It's not very pleasant to use. This is the deluxe tool. So it won't release until it gets the proper pressure. So this makes it really easy, and I have a video using this tool. I really like it, and it's worth it, and like I said, I build all my harnesses, I probably built 10, 12, 15 airplanes using these tools. Soldering iron, I just use a 25-watt welder soldering iron. Like this, with a pointy tip on it for my small gauge soldering. You could buy a soldering station, things like that. I know that I can go to Orchard Supply or Home Depot and get a new tip on a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday night. I'd like to get a soldering station, but I've got these and they're cheap.
What type of solder do you use?
I use a rosin core solder. I've got the Radio Shack, and I use the really fine stuff. It's about 22 thousandths, 23 thousandths, like this. And you always want to use a rosin core, not an acid core.
Yeah, and don't use water soluble.
Water soluble flux.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't.
Save the
Everybody uses
rosin
flux.
core, or you can use the no-king solder where you don't have.
Okay, I've had real good results with this. I've tried others. And this
That's
is
just
just,
the regular 1064 or 10 lead.
this is actually a silver variant solder.
Oh, it's got some silver.
It's got a little bit of silver. I don't know how much, but
Says N62, so it's about, trying to think, it's just a small amount of silver.
Yeah.
You don't use any of that red flux stuff?
you don't use any flux for electronics, no. No.
This
If it's
best
clean,
you can get out there right
use, a clean soldering iron, you don't need any of that.
Now,
Flex
when you-
is for
when you're done
cleaning
soldering,
the oxides
before you
off the
put your
surface,
iron
so
away,
when you breathe.
now. Coat your tip with the solder and then
Yes.
keep your tip from
Oh, yeah,
oxidizing.
yeah. What I usually do is before I even plug it in, I'll just lightly burnish the tip here, and not down to the copper unless it's really chewed up. And then as it heats up, I'll put a little solder on it and then wipe it. I have a stand with a sponge there, typical stuff.
But when you put it away with restless solder.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I have a 40 watt that I use for bigger stuff, making batteries primarily. Something where you want to go in hot and fast. Suppliers, I'm a big fan of Hanson Hobbies. I buy all my wire, the crimper, my connectors. I bought a connector kit from him. Real good people. I place an order, I have it at my door 3-4 days later at the worst. I get a letter or I get an email, thank you for your order, here's the tracker. Real good results with these. So I really like Hanson Hobbies. Aloft Hobbies is in Marin, Nevada. He's starting to stock stuff like multiplex connectors and wire and stuff like that. I checked his website recently, a lot of it was out of stock. But, if you're looking for some local stuff, he's also a good service. Servo City down in Southern California, a good place to buy servos. They carry servo wire. I don't buy a lot of stuff from them because I get, like I said, most of my stuff from Hanson. And then I found another place, servos and stuff, that looked interesting. They have a lot of different connectors and
I've been buying from them for
servos.
years.
Have you?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, wiring, they sell the twisted wire,
Yeah.
the silicone twisted wire,
Okay.
3-in-1, and all the connectors and all the pins.
Okay, yeah, I just recently saw them, so their prices aren't any different than Hanson, so, I'm sticking with Hanson. And then, for my bulk stuff, PCB header pins, shrink tubing, DB9 connectors, Prize Electronics, HSC, or Halted. Halted is a surplus house.
Second Saturday of the month at Yancey College is electronic flea market.
Is it?
Yes,
Okay.
up until, let's see, September's the last one, right?
So HSC or Halted?
Sometimes October, but no, it's September.
is in Santa Clara. It's a surplus electronics house. And if you're building something custom and cool, you could spend an hour in there just looking through all the boxes with connectors and things like that. I mean, we found all kinds of weird stuff.
It's right off of Lawrence near Central Expressway.
Yes. They also have new stuff. They'll have the soldering irons and switches and things like that. I buy shrink tubing in bulk over at Fry's. You get a 3-foot piece of it for 50 cents, and you cut it up into little 6-inch, 12-inch pieces.
HSC has the same.
Yeah. Oh, they have the
Yeah, they have
Okay.
their size of shrink tube.
HSC finally cleaned up their store, so you can actually not trick in it.
okay. So if you go to the hobby shop and you buy shrink tubing, what is it, like $2, and
Yeah.
you get 6 inches or something like that. It comes in nice colors, but,
You can get colors at HSC.
okay. So I've got my box here, I've got just a whole assortment of shrink tubing. I get the big stuff like this, and this is good for putting over connectors. So wire selection, okay, so I am not an electrician or an EE or electronic tech, so I'm pretty much based on what I've used. For a small plane with small servos, 28 to 32 gauge wire. For the 4-meter TD planes, 24, 26 gauge. That harness that's going around is 26 gauge. We've had real good luck with that. I don't know if I put it in here, but wire is not wire. And I have a slide later in the end that'll show the comparison between wires. The stuff I get from Hanson is a real nice insulation. It doesn't melt when you solder it, and it's got a high wire count. So you can buy like 26 gauge with 30 strands, or you can buy it with like 6 strands of wire. 7 strands, is that what it is? The 7 strand obviously is going to be thicker wire. It's less flexible. It's more likely to break if it's flexed. The high strand wire is very flexible and very reliable, so I buy good wire. The larger planes with larger servos, 20 to 24 gauge is what's been recommended. If I'm doing a high current draw, like a retract servo, something that's going to suck out, or canopy break or something like that, I'll step up a gauge in wire. Down, yeah, it confuses me.
Yeah.
0 is big and 32 is small.
Increase wire size.
Increase the wire, there you go. And then, or an extra long run, go on one size of wire, not gauge, but size. Connectors, we got your standard servo terminals, and that's, you know, what we crimp on. You can get them in header rows like this. And you have the male and the female. And the male is actually inside the housing, the female housing, right. But they're male terminals inside of it. The end that plugs into the receiver is actually a female in a male housing. Not confusing at all.
Just think about it this way, you have those pins with power on them hanging out in midair.
True.
Yeah.
And then twisted versus ribbon. I generally use the ribbon. Twisted isn't used so much anymore, and I think it was mostly a 72 megahertz kind of thing, because twisted will cut down on your RF noise. Okay, so it's like twisted pair idea. And with today's receivers, 2.4, it's not really needed. The other thing is, to twist the wire, you start off with 10 inches. After you twist it, you end up with 6 inches. So you've got more wire. It's heavier. Okay, so it's like Sailplane.
So if you want to twist your wire, get about 10 feet of it, take your wires, make a big knot in it, stick it in the chuck of a drill,
That's what we used to do.
and have somebody else
And
hang on to the other
stand.
end, and you
and then you walk towards the,
Right.
the end of the
Now, at the end of that, before you release everything, pull,
Okay?
Yeah.
because otherwise it's gonna go into a knot.
You mean you wouldn't braid it?
No.
Or you can use ribbon wire.
The other way to do it is you back twist the individual filaments before you wrap the three together.
That's a lot of work.
Well, it's all a lot of work, but that works.
You're also saying, the pieces of shrink tubing, you show something that shrink tubing over the wires?
Yeah, that keeps it together.
I use shrink tubing,
To hold them together?
to hold, well, to insulate it.
But no, on your master.
Oh, to braid,
Great,
yeah, to make a loom. They also make that braid, the helicopter guys use it, it's that expanding braid, not on braid.
We call them Chinese finger puzzles.
Exactly, it's the same kind of thing. You
Yeah.
push it, it grows, you stuff your wires in, you pull it, and it shrinks.
Yeah.
It's a sleeve, it's a nylon sleeve. Helicopters guys like them. Of course, they're running all their wires next to all that carbon fiber, sharp carbon fiber, so they try to protect them. So you got standard servo terminals, DV9s, so the harness that's going around has got a DV9. I buy them bulk at Fry's. Actually end up using 8 of the 9 pins on here. And I solder my connectors on, and then I use hot glue to hold the wires in. If you look at the harness that's coming around, the DV9's got hot glue on both sides of it.
Can't pot it with hot glue. You kind of
I pot it, exactly, pot it with hot glue. It keeps the wires in place, and it isolates the connections and everything.
It's lighter than epoxy.
And especially where, one of these is going into a carbon fiber wing. So you want to make sure it's protected.
Some people are trying to pot with silicon,
Okay,
don't, unless you have industrial grade electronics.
here's acid,
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's very acidic.
Yeah.
Acetic acid.
and it's silicon.
And you'll get shorts and you'll have.
Hot glue is so easy. 5 minutes before I'm done, I plug in my glue gun. Okay, I'm ready, squirt it on there, lick my finger and shape it while it's still hot, and then unplug the gun.
I started using that at your HVAC test.
Yeah. I just built a little 3D foamy plane, I hot glued the servos in, so. So DB9s, multiplex, a lot of people are familiar with the multiplex connectors. I don't know if I can pass these around. These are 6-pin connectors. They're good for 2-piece wings that slide into a fuselage. So you've got the root, you've got a multiplex connector in the root, you've got another connector in the wing. You slide the wing on, it automatically connects. The Dean's pins, I don't use a lot of these, I have a few of them. But the Dean's, the little 3-pin, 4-pin connectors, 2 pins sometimes. And then various PCB connectors. Like I said, you go over to Halted and you find all different kinds of stuff. This is a, 10-pin connector that I got over there. And then you get other ones that looks like servo connectors, but there's 5 pins in them. So these are good for flushing into, I think something like what Noel did on his DLG. You flush these into the wing or into the fuselage, and then you make a plug out of header pins and plug it in. And you can get these with pins already in them. All kinds of weird stuff. Just go over there and look around for a while.
Bruce? Another source, a possible source for electronic parts is Anchor Electronics.
I saw Anchor. I haven't been over there yet, but I saw their website.
Yeah, they're in Scott, I think. next
They're not
to
too far from
Lafayette.
Halted.
Well, they're
Yeah.
Scott and Lafayette.
They're on the other side of Central Expressway, I think.
Be careful when you exit out the building, because they'll yell at you if you go through the same door.
Yeah, you gotta go to the door. I have found stuff there that I didn't find anywhere else.
So just general tips, and then I got a video and another document from Hanson Hobbies. Keep your, we already talked about it, keep your soldering iron tips clean. It's hard as heck to solder with a dirty, corroded soldering tip. You know, just replace it if it needs to be replaced, or there's times when I will just turn it off, let it cool down, and take a sanding block or a file and file all the old solder off and retin the tip again. Pre-tin your wires and connectors. So you strip, oh, I didn't even show my tool stripper. So this is a little deal I got over at Fry's, and it will strip all 3 wires at one time. So you just put this in, it's got a stop on it, and you just put it in and you close it, it pulls, it strips all 3 wires at the same time. It was pretty cheap, and I had to tweak with it as far as the pressure in that because it was damaging the insulation. I actually filed down the gripper at the front here, but it's like that, just boom, I got all 3. And then I have my other standard stripper, or Mr. Duder got this one for me, so I'm pretty sure it's a good one. It's my favorite. So before I got this, I would do one at a time with this, and you always end up with one, oh, the installation's 30 seconds shorter or longer, or something like that. This one, just go in and bam, I got all 3.
Those will cut wires if they're not just.
This will, this does, yeah, this one,
It's been around about 20 years, sold as a Pac-Man wire stripper.
the little wires, it doesn't work at all for the little wires. I got it working pretty good for the 26 and above, but the little guys doesn't work very well.
Bruce, when you do pins, like that you make for the servo connectors,
Yes,
make sure you have the correct wire gauge and insulation size.
okay,
Those crimps are designed for a specific size.
yes,
So if you buy a wire from other than servo supply places or hobby supply places for servos, because you think it's a good deal, you may end up with insulation
that's
too
too
large,
large, yeah.
and you won't be able to crimp, and therefore you can't slide it into.
Yeah, and then you can't slide it into the housing, yeah.
Hey, Bruce,
Yes,
question maybe for you and Dave over there, Dave Kane. Some time ago, Dave, you recommended do not buy the new types of solder, get the old lead stuff.
Yeah.
Did you change your mind?
No, that RMA solder is the old standby.
Okay.
you're talking lead-free?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
lead-free, water soluble, which after you use it is very brittle. It'll fracture and give you cold solders,
Right.
and so you'll have intermittent in your controls, you don't want that. You stay with the tin lead mixture, RMA solder in there, and it's very pliable. You can stress a little bit and it won't lose its lube, so to speak.
Looks more doubtful.
Yeah, definitely.
So pre-tin your wires, use jigs, clamps, weights, whatever you can when you build it. I've got one of these guys here, I'm sure probably a lot of people have them. It's got the alligator clip on the end. I actually have 2 of them, don't know how I got 2, but sometimes it's like, wow.
Another thing I like to use is, I take clothespins and saw off the edge so that the pinching part is right flush with the end.
Okay.
I can screw that onto a board or out with it, but it can, or even by itself,
Yeah.
it can be used to hold a light wire while you solder it.
I have 2 little 2-ounce blocks of lead that I poured years ago for DLG ballast. Works great for holding down wires. I have a little sanding block. I put the wire on top of it, I put the lead on top of it, it holds the wire still, pre-tin my wires, put my connector in this guy, jig it all up, and go in there and solder it. The other thing is, when you're soldering connectors, especially the plastic connectors, it's good to put the main pieces together. Okay, so use a complete connector, because when you solder it, you're heating up the plastic, the connectors can move. So it acts as an alignment tool and also acts as a heat sink. I do this on header pins. I'll plug them into, happen to have a little cutoff connector that I have in my toolbox that I just plug a header pin in when I'm soldering my header pins. So that keeps, you know, if you ever soldered, like, especially the beams are really bad. You solder them freestyle, and then you go to plug them in, they won't plug the other because you heat them up and the blade moves, so. So, any questions so far? Or anything you guys want to see?
Actually, I want to make a comment about jigs. At the field last year, one of our pilots, he blew a flap out before the competition. So he had another ring for another plane in his car. So he went, plugged that in, smoke. And this past year, I took a fuselage for TV, wanted to tip that wing and put it on an electric fuse. Ordered a prepaid
The harness?
harness.
Yep.
What I found is I have 3 wiring harnesses that have 3 jigged completely differently for wiring. My favorite is the one where everything is wired the same except positive and negative.
Oh, well, let's help.
I built,
Yeah.
about 6 months ago, I built a 2-meter plane for a friend of mine. He had a slope fuse and an electric fuse. He ordered, from Soaring USA, ordered 2 harnesses, right, because he wanted to slide the wings on.
Yep.
Good thing I checked the harnesses because it was the same thing.
Yeah, I've been told the guy at Soaring USA now uses a jig, where before all he did was make sure that the output wires on both ends of the DB9.
Yeah, that always worries me. I go through my beep out harnesses before other people's harnesses. For me, I now have a wiring diagram on the inside of my torque box for my DB9s and for my switch jacks. I also make switch jacks for DLGs and things like that.
Yeah, I haven't put it in my,
Oh,
but
perfect.
same thing, which is,
Yeah.
take the wiring and figure out what you're gonna do with it, and just stay consistent.
So another good tool might be a voltmeter, so you can check continuity, things like that, beep out lines and stuff like that. And that's usually what I do too, after I build a harness, is I'll beep it out and I'll make sure it works. And I'll test it before I install it in the plane. I haven't built a bad one yet, but it sure would suck to install it and then have to take it back out. See how this works. So this is from the Hanson Hobby site.
Hi,
He's
this
gonna
is
crimp
Chris
up.
at Hanson Hobbies, and I'm going to make a
Do that now,
Soaring
just try to get the
66.
sounder.
Yeah, I think the sound's probably turned off on my.
You can just, why don't you just explain it by Joseph?
Well, it's a 60, you just gonna crimp show you how to crimp a servo terminal in 60 seconds.
Not with the wire snipper, right?
Yeah, you see he's got the clock running. Yeah, he does do all 3 in the descriptor.
Caution on doing all 3 at the same time, you can damage the other 2 pairs of wire. As an electrical contractor, it's not wise to do it that way.
Yeah, you get different diameters in that stripper.
Yep.
So if you over crimp, you're gonna.
I've seen electrical explosions and fires because of that trick.
Yeah, you cut down the strands.
Yeah, but he's in it.
You'll get them.
You gotta do it in
Yeah,
60
he's in a
seconds.
hurry.
There you go, 60
Okay,
seconds.
so he got lucky there. Because those pins going into that housing all have to be the same orientation. They have a little tab on.
Oh, yeah.
Set, so
What I do when I make up a harness is I will usually have a store-bought connector sitting in front of me. And I'm going, okay, the signal wire goes
Yeah.
here, and the connector goes like this, so I usually, in fact, this, like I said, I have a little cutoff point inside my parts box here. Usually what I'll do is, before I start crimping, because there's a signal wire's gotta go on one side, right? And then the connector, like you said, it's got the tang on it, it's gotta go on a certain side in the housing. So yeah, you can't just crimp up stuff and put it together.
Is there a tool that can remove the pins, or is basically?
Remove
once they-
pins?
Once the pins are installed into the housing?
There's a little plastic tab on the housing. Take a number 11 X-Acto blade, lift up that plastic tab, and slide them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
It's
lot.
small. It's small.
An overbend.
Yeah.
Right, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
No, you
Just
gotta
lift up on the plastic, low pressure, and it's like this.
On the male end, the end that goes into the receiver. On the other end, the female end, that is a standard connector with male pins. So the pins actually stick out of this connector, and then you slide a sleeve over. This is not coming apart unless you cut it apart. Once you slide that in, it's pretty permanent.
So you're talking about mixing them up backwards and whoops, and so that.
Well, yeah, you end up cutting the sleeve off and then pulling the pins out. Now, that said, I won't go into that. Get a commercial one, if you're gonna do it, get a commercial one, lay it down on the table, look at it before you start wiring. I've been doing this for years. First thing I do is I get one I know that works, put it on the table in front of me. Okay, I'm ready. And then on the Hanson Hobbies website, this is like a 12-page, 11-page document that is written out. And it's a really good document. If you guys want any more details, it explains a whole bunch of stuff. And I'll just kind of highlight some of the stuff. So we already talked about the female versus the male. This connector is inside of this housing. So this is just a housing that slides on, and it locks in there. But they have different pins. So this is the pin that goes into your receiver. In your receiver, you have a post, either vertical or horizontal. The pins, 3 pins. So power ground. Yeah, I know signal, but I wanted to make sure I got the power ground. It's ground, power, signal. And this slides on, and then this is on the other end of the servo extension, so that you can plug your servo into it. So you have your male and female terminals. And he goes into gold terminals and tin plate terminals and life cycles and all that kind of stuff. So it's a real good document, and I will post on the club forum a link to this document so you guys can look at it.
Not to steal your thunder, later in this, does he show how to place the wire in the pins? If not, we should discuss that there.
I think he does.
Is there any like grease or anything to put on the copper when you do the crimp, or you just do bare?
There, you don't need anything.
Yeah.
For.
Go back to where the pins were there for a minute. Okay, let's look at the male terminal. And you see 2 silver connections at the back. Right where his finger was there is
So this
part
is
of
the
the
crimp.
strip wire goes in that section. The insulation stops at the back of that.
Yep, right there.
Finger is, and so those 2 longer tangs dovetail over the installation.
Of the strain.
And that becomes a strain lead, correct?
So, why don't you talk about crimp versus solder? Why would you not solder these?
The biggest problem that I've ever seen, I've tried to solder these,
You have to be good.
You gotta be
Run down. and-
very minimal, yeah. The solder
Very
will,
careful.
Get too big.
will wick right up to the tip and
Well,
ruin the
The
tip.
thing is, it will also wick back that way, up
Pull
the wire,
insulation off.
and so that makes the wire stiff
If-
and more likely to break.
Yeah.
So that's why you crimp versus solder.
You can also melt the insulation.
The insulation and the smaller wires, that happens a lot.
Oh,
Again, if you buy a good wire,
And if you get excess solder on, have fun filing it off so you get the pin in.
in there, yeah.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I started off, I didn't have a crimper. I started off soldering, but then once you figure out that that solder is whipping up the wire, and now it's flexing, and, or not flexing, right, and it's cracking, so that's a possible failure.
Successful.
there is one liquid to protect the pins for like float fly. But I only recommend for the float fly products of planes and stuff.
Okay,
It's called Corrosion X.
also it's waterproofing.
It's waterproofing. I only recommend it for water activities only.
If you need something like that, then you can't get that, use Vaseline.
Okay. So the housings, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but Futaba went off the wrong way, and they put this nice little tab off the side.
Yeah.
So you have to use Futaba connectors, receivers, or
You take the exact.
you take an X-Acto knife and cut it off. This is the Universal / JR, high-tech JR electronics. Everybody but Futaba uses this one.
But it works in the top.
It does work with Futaba. You have to be careful to make sure the signal goes where the signal's supposed to go and things like that. You have to make sure, double check your orientation. But even if you swap it, I don't think there's any problem because you've got power and ground on 2 and signal here. So if you swap it like this, you're not gonna short it out.
No, and
Unlike the old electronics, if you swapped it,
I have
it would blow up your
swap
servo.
pins and those servos to make.
Yeah, the only problem with swapping pins I find in these connectors is the plastic piece that catches the tab doesn't always go flat, and
Okay.
sometimes it can
If
back out.
the pin's not pushed all the way in.
So I'd rather not do that. One time use some and make sure they stay fast.
So he talks a lot about servo wire, what types he sells, what kind he recommends, what kind you can buy, twisted versus ribbon. How much time do we got? Not much. He talks about wire size. This is an interesting chart. So here's the wire he sells, here's some of his competitors. This is Deluxe 26, this is a wire I buy. It's got a 30-strand count. You measure ohms per 1,000 feet. He calculates wire gauge and then weight per foot
Wow.
and the flexibility. So if you look at, here's the 26 I buy, here's his economy, like Dave said, 7 strands.
Flexibility is way down.
If you look at the heavier gauge, 22 is 60 versus 17. So, and he compares, his competitors and things like that. His comment is that they're not always accurately stating the gauge of the wire. Stripping the wire, don't do what he does there.
Yeah.
There's the economy crimping tool.
I got one of those, it's hard to work with.
I tried it, and Kyle has it now.
Okay, that's the plan, it's price is right.
Just don't walk into my planes.
Yeah, it's hard to get a consistent one. This deluxe tool is so cool, it's just
How much is that?
$40.
It's worth it though.
It is. It's takes a little bit of getting used to. What I find with is I get everything all set up, and as I'm squeezing, the back part where it grabs the insulation kind of spreads, and also now the wire's loose in there, so you gotta go really quick.
Does it crimp the wire and the insulation? Just the wire?
It crimps, well, it's two-stage. The blades,
Oh, there's two, oh, I see.
there's actually two different dies inside,
I
in
saw-
line.
I saw it, yeah.
So 1, 2, and it crimps the wire and the insulation at the same time, different diameters.
That's the two different wires. Yeah, I saw it, right.
Yeah, you can see here.
Yeah.
It's crimped here, and then the teeth that holds onto the insulation. And here's showing you how to do it with the economy tool. And then, here's what we were talking about, the little tangs.
I can see it there,
Yeah,
enlarged.
there's a bar right here that catches on this side of that tang. You can see it right here. If you come in with a X-Acto blade, lift that tang just a little bit and pull the connector out. It'll come
Yeah,
out.
it's just, you gotta shove the pin in sometimes a little bit harder to clear the tang, and then you.
Exactly. What I'll do sometimes is I'll stick an X-Acto blade under the tang and push the pin in. You know, sometimes depending on the wire size and the housing and things like that, it could be a little tight getting that in there. And you can push this in as far as you can. It's still got to go another 1/16 of an inch to lock in. If you take the connector and look at it from the side, make sure all those tangs are down flat. If they're not down flat, you haven't pushed the pin in far enough.
Do a pull test after you're done.
Do a pull test, it's another good way. You've done this before. This is the same thing, but the nail pins and the housing.
Getting the housing is really difficult off that connector.
Getting it off,
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never gotten one off without cutting it.
I've done it. It's not
The
easy.
the reason being is on the inside of the connector, there's 3 teeth molded into the inside, and they lock in here. So you push it in hard, and it snaps in. So yeah, it's,
You gotta run a flat tool in there to lift that, to slide it out.
shim.
I use the shim. It's gotta be very thin.
Oh, shim.
Let the shim come in there.
there's a
Where's that?
you know, I buy them in bulk, so. I buy 100 feet of wire and like 50, 60 connectors, pieces for.
So you have a standard wire that you use, what is it?
I use a 26 gauge on my floors. It's a little on the light side, but it's worked. Again, that's a quality, high strand wire.
And do you have common ground and power as you go along further down the line?
I do on the wiring harnesses. I will have common power and ground on the left side of the wing and another common power and ground on the right
Of course,
side.
yeah.
For every connection, you're doubling, when you add, you double the current to the return. And the voltage drop, yeah, it just depends on
There he
how much
shows
servo draws.
lifting the tab.
Yeah.
This is some pretty
And
big.
don't lift any more than you have to clear.
Because you can break it real easy.
You either break it or you deform it where it won't come back.
Yeah, that's right. Header pins. So this is, I use a lot of these. Again, these are kind of buried inside the airplane where I don't expect to be taking them apart and stuff like that. It's cheap, it's light. I actually weighed a header pin versus the standard female/male connector, and it was like a half a gram heavier for the servo connector, a gram, 2 grams, something like that. BECs, so this is a JST connector. I haven't done too many of these. Usually it's easier to just buy a pre-soldered, pre-made length with some really nice silicone wire on it. In fact, I bought one today over at the hobby shop. How we test voltage resistance and voltage drop for pins and wires and things like that. You technical guys will get into that. We mix a receiver adapter, and I guess this was back when you bought one receiver and you flew 8 planes with it. So rather than wearing out the pins in the receiver, wear out a universal connector. And that's it. I did want to mention one thing. I went over to Aeromichael. You know, I listed a lot of mail order or online order sources for parts. I did go over Aeromichael, and they had most of these parts in stock. They didn't have the DB9s, but most of the servo pins and connectors and things like that, the wire. The price was reasonable. It was a little bit more than I'd pay for Hanson. I pay for shipping for Hanson, I don't pay tax, so I mean, it kind of balances out. They had 10-foot lengths of wire, 26 gauge for about $6. They also had the lighter wire, the 32 gauge there.
I think they've got the cheap crimper.
They have the economy crimper there, and they sell the pins.
You know, Bruce, one thing that Errol might do for you, you've got the Perry over there.
Yeah,
If you tell him what you want, he'll have it for you within a week.
if I order from Hanson, I'll have it in 3 days.
Yeah, but either way, if you
Yeah,
want
I
to deal
know.
with the mail order,
I try to support hobby shops.
but he can get almost anything you want.
Unfortunately, I don't fly quads, so I just go to hobby shops.
So that's just another way of getting what you need.
So that's all I got.
All right, great.
Great.